Hey, what's up guys? My name's Jeffrey and this video series is going to be all about how to craft your electric guitar tone so that you know that you're getting the best possible tone. Whatever amp you're playing, whatever guitar you're playing, whatever pedals you're playing, whatever style you're playing in, that you know that you have the ability to get the best tone possible. The same tone that Keith Urban or John Mayer or Metallica is getting. There's some basic principles that you need to understand and some things that you're probably doing wrong that we're going to address in this video series that are going to massively affect the way that you get guitar tone and change you for the better. So to get started, we're going to talk about something as a general overview, and then we're going to dig in this video to amps. And we're going to talk about how to dial in an amp, and then at the end of this video we're going to transition over to talking about microphones and how to set up a microphone on an amp, because those all play, that very much plays into the type of tone that you're getting, and a mic at the end of the day affects everything about your tone. It's the make or break. If you don't know what you're doing with a microphone, then everything that you do in your guitar, your amp, your pedals means nothing if you aren't properly miking your amp. So we're going to talk about that at the end of this video, transition to a separate recording. But for right now, what I want to do is start off with talking about EQ. Now, EQ is something that you see on your amps. You see on your amp, you got the treble, the bass, and the mid. That's a general EQ, but basically what that is talking about is an EQ spectrum. If you think of it, about it like a flat line, let me use this microphone as an example. So if we think about EQ like a flat line, then when we're listening, what we want to be listening for in getting tone, no matter if it's with pedals or if it's with amps, is a nice even flat line. So if you think of bass being down here, mids being up here, and treble being up here, and you close your eyes and you strum a chord, what is popping out to you? Is it the treble? The high end of the guitar is bouncing up more than the mids, or the mids are bouncing up more than the bass? And you sort of make adjustments based on that flat line, and you try and get everything to flatten out and to be nice and smooth so that you end up hearing as much bass as you do with treble as you do with mids. Now this is different than getting tone in your car. If you're trying to set your car stereo, you might want to bump the bass, because just that's what you've always been taught. Bump the bass, turn the mids down, turn the treble up, you're going to get a powerful rocking mix. Now it's different when it comes to getting great tone on the guitar, on the electric guitar. What you want to do is get the most flat-lined mix as you can, and then let the sound engineers make the adjustments on their end. And that's for one main reason. It's so that they can turn you up. It's so that when they turn you up in their mix, if they turn you up at front of house, or if they turn you up in the studio monitors if you're recording, that nothing is poking out louder than the other thing. Now, what happens if you have too much high end in your guitar, which is often what the mistake guitarists make. Let's bring up our flat EQ again, and let's say bass is down here, treble is up here. They might have a spike right around here, like that sound that the pick noise makes is causing a high mid bump, what we would call a high mid bump, and it's spiking right here. Well, that means that this spike in your EQ, that high mid frequency, is actually getting to your ear, or getting to the listener's ear louder, or I like to say quicker than the rest of the mix. So that means that your guitar ends up sounding more like this high mid bump than it does like the rest of your guitar sound, and that's a bad thing. When my guitar hits the listener's ear, I want all the frequencies to hit at the same time, because once other stuff comes into play, like the band, like the acoustic guitar, like the pads, it all starts fighting everything in your guitar EQ. And the one frequency that's going to win over the rest of the guitar, or over the rest of the guitar frequency, is going to be that one bad EQ that's poking out. So it's going to make your guitar sound like that one bad EQ. Now, if you just had your guitar soloed up in the mix, it wouldn't be as much of a problem, because you'd still hear a lot of this lows and a lot of this highs, and it would be less noticeable. But when it's in the mix, the bad stuff is going to poke through more than the rest. So that's the importance of getting a really flat EQ. Now, as we talk, we're going to zoom in on this amp and we're going to aim to get a really flat EQ out of this amp. And we're going to do that in two different ways. We're going to do a dirty amp setup and a clean amp setup. And both are going to be set up separate in two different schools of thought, but both are aiming to get the amp sounding as big and full as possible. And by doing so, we're going to do as flat as possible. The only thing I have going on the engineering end, just so you know, is a high pass filter for any of those tech guys out there. I have a little bit of that low end on the guitar taken out that you can't hear can't audibly hear anyway. If you've watched any of our other videos, we talk about how to EQ on the engineering end and why to do that. Basically, it's just to take out the mud that you can't hear that doesn't really affect the guitar tone at all, and it makes your signal end up sounding that much clearer. In this video, we're not going to talk about much in engineering land, but right now we're going to zoom in on this amp and go for it. So again, this is two schools of thought. One is setting up your amp dirty. The second is setting up your amp clean, and how to make both be a winner. By the way, I'm playing a Gretsch Duo Jet for this video. This is a early 2000s model. Here we go, let's zoom in on the amp. Okay, so we're gonna start off with this Fender ProSonic amp. Now this is a fantastic amp for a great price range. They don't make them anymore. They're mid-90s model amps. They sound British for Fender amps. Fender amps are commonly American style amps, what we would call American style tube amps. Now this is the most British of them all, in my opinion, and it's a great model. You can find these on Reverb actually for only $500, $600, $700 actually. So this is a great little head, and the cabs are mic'd backstage in a studio environment, so we won't show those today. But let's get started on dialing in this amp. So first of all, on your guitar, the best thing to do when setting up your amp is to be on the bridge selection pickup. So I have my bridge selection all the way down, and that's because that's the brightest setting of this guitar. So that means it uses this bridge selection right here, and it uses the brightest setting on this guitar. All the knobs are turned all the way up. And the reason for that is I'm trying to get my brightest setting on my guitar absolutely smooth. I'm trying to get that top end smoothed out and get the bottom nice and full and raise up that bottom end with the brightest setting on that guitar. That is because then when I go to play live, I know that I'm never ever too bright. If I set up my tone as a baseline tone with the brightest setting on my guitar, then I know that I'm automatically fixing that problem that most guitar players have, that their guitar tone is too bright. Again, bridge selection, pickup only, and then all the knobs turned all the way up, and then I'm trying to raise up that bass and mid to the same level as that treble and get a nice even tone starting at the amp. So here we go. I'm full volume, everything on, and now I have treble, bass, and mid turned up all the way. And I'm going to start rolling up this volume until I get the proper amount of breakup that I'm looking for. So right now we're looking for a dirty sound from this amp, which is going to be the edge of breakup, meaning that when I dig into the guitar, it's going to be nice and broken up, and then when I lean back and play a little softer, it'll start to clean up. I'm going to turn off my vocal mic so you can hear the tone as clear as possible. Okay, first thing to realize is that I am giving nice, big, full rakes to get my tone. I'm not noodling around, I'm not playing jazz licks or big, I'm not trying to play John Mayer solos or something. I'm just doing big, giant, full G chords, and that's just so I can really hear the fullness of my guitar. I'm not concerned about others thinking that I'm a fantastic guitar player right now. I'm just trying to get the most out of this amp as possible. So I always set tone with big, full chords. So you saw that I turned that up to about 4 or 5, which is giving me a nice amount of breakup, but when I back off, it's able to clean up. All right, now let's start to listen for the EQ. So if I asked you, what are you hearing pop out over the rest of these? If I'm separating treble, bass, and mids, what is the EQ range that you hear being louder in that mix than the rest of my EQ? Let me turn off my vocal mic and play a big chord. Okay, to me, right out of the gates, I'm pretty close to being there. I'm not all the way there yet. I'm not all the way flat yet, but I can hear that I have just a few adjustments to make my tone sound nice and flat. First one being that I feel like there's a little bit more treble than there is bass and mids. So how am I going to combat that? I can either turn treble down or I can turn bass and mids up. Now I'm of the school of thought that I think it's better to use to cut away EQ ranges versus add. So it's called subtractive EQ versus additive EQ or adding EQ. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out a little bit of the mids just to start and see if that starts flattening out my tone. And I'm going to take out a little bit of the treble as well. Here we go. And then one thing, so you see I ended up cutting out treble. I boosted a little bit of the mids at the end of the day there, and I've got a nice even tone down playing low on the neck. Nice even EQ range. Now what I want to do is start playing higher on the neck and see if my tone gets muddy or if it stays nice and clear. The higher I go on the guitar, the more up towards the pickups or towards the 12th fret I go, the higher frequencies I'm going to start producing. So that's when I really want to make sure that this treble isn't hurting anybody's ears. I want to take all the hurt out of this and make it sound nice and smooth. This, if you haven't noticed already, is the danger zone on the guitar, which I want. If the goal of my guitar tone is to be nice and smooth on the top end without sacrificing any clarity, then I know that I've won. Okay, so I feel like I'm there with my clean tone. Again, that's my clean tone with setting up your amp dirty. Now I can clean up by playing lighter. Now what I want to try and test is my tone good if I start stacking on drive pedals. Now in the next video we're going to talk about drive pedals, so I don't want to get into how to turn on a drive pedal, how to EQ a drive pedal. We will get there next video, but for right now I'm just testing one simple medium stage drive, so this is like a lead tone, and seeing if it sounds good with this treble, mid and bass setting. Okay, I think I'm there. Now let's talk about setting up the amp as a clean amp. So this is going to be a little bit more difficult for stacking drives, and we'll get there in the next video again. But the more I turn down the more I turn down the volume, the less the speakers are outputting all that good saturation, all that nice warm tones, and it's going to become increasingly difficult to get a nice big huge full tone out of this amp. So we're going to have to work a little bit harder, but there's a trick to it that I'm going to show you. So let's start over again with all the EQ. This EQ is going to end up different now when we start to turn down the volume. So here we go. Here's clean tone. There's no pedals on right now. And I'm going to turn off my vocal mic so you can hear it. Okay, so that's where I want to be. I want to be where I dig into the amp. To set up an amp clean, I want to be able to dig into the amp and it's not breaking up at all. When I dig in, when I play hard, there's absolutely no amp distortion coming out of this amp. Now, EQ-wise, what am I hearing? Obviously, the amp sounds a lot smaller. And that's not a good thing. We still want the big full range of this amp to come out, but we want there to be no breakup. So let's try and fix that in EQ, and then I'm going to add a trick to that afterwards. So turning my vocal mic off, we're going to fix the EQ now to be nice and flat with clean tone. Okay, I'm there with my EQ range. Now what I have to do is to boost all these frequencies up to a level that is going to be a nice big full level. I'm actually going to throw on a compressor on the board that's going to be a more aggressive setting than you might normally see. For instance, when I'm throwing on a compressor on my dirty amp, I'm going to turn the threshold. I'm not going to crank that threshold as much as I would when I'm doing it with the clean amp. So as a compressor pedal, and I'll talk about compressor pedals in the next video, I'm really compressing this amp now to bring up that volume, to bring out all those intricacies in the EQ and the intricacies in the tone of this amp out. Turning off my lapel. Okay, so you can tell that I'm getting a ton of sustain, I'm getting a ton of clarity, and really a nice big full clean tone out of that. Now, when I switch pickups, everything should stay intact, everything should be just as good. For instance, I switch to the middle pickup. So you can see that the EQ settings that you set up for the amount of dirt that you have will work with each one of these pickup selections, so you don't have to worry about that. As long as you set your bass tone up with your treble setting, meaning your bridge pickup selection, your brightest sound out of your guitar, then it's going to sound the best on all the settings as well. Clean setup, use a ton of compression, and that's pretty much it. All right, we're gonna swap over. The rest of this video is now gonna be a video talking about mic placement setup. You're gonna see that we're in a studio environment where I'm moving the mic around, and that's gonna be paramount to making sure that your tone is translating through the microphone. So here we go. Hey guys, in this short video, I wanna talk briefly about how I mic an amp. Today I have a Jackson Ampworks Scarlett 30, and I have two 57s, which is a real typical setup that I use when I'm miking an amp. And this is a really important step when you're getting great tone, is knowing how to mic an amp and sort of the general thought process behind why we do what we do at the amplifier. So when I'm setting up an amp, you know, I'm gonna get all my tone just with the knobs and stuff, and then it's important to realize that the mics are going to interpret that in their own way. Depending on what mic I'm using, it can sound totally different with my ears right in front of the amp than it does with the microphone. So when I'm miking an amp, I want to, one, keep that in mind, and two, try and mic the sweet spots, or basically the spots of that I want represented. So on an amp, you know, you have your speaker and you have your center. That's going to be the brightest part, and then closest to the edge is going to get gradually darker. So with this amp, the speaker's right in the middle. So what I want to do is with this 57, which is a pretty straight ahead, tight, brighter mic, I'm going to mic the center of the speaker, and then I'm going to mic the outside of the speaker. And this is a typical setup live or in the studio that we will use to represent the entire speaker, basically. So this is what it sounds. I don't have any pedals on right now. Just playing a regular Strat. Now, if I move the mic around, let's get rid of this mic for now. And I just want to show you what's going to happen with the tone when I move the mic around. So here we have straight on. I'm going to play the same chord slightly to the left. I'm going to play the same chord even more to the left, even more to the left, back, up tight. So with all those chords, you know, you can hear the difference in the subtleties of the EQ that's changing. And so it's important to just know how far and where to mic the amp. So typically when we're miking an amp, we have one offset about an inch in from the edge of the speaker. And if we're single miking the amp, that's where we'll leave the mic, because the bright stuff right in the middle is going to be the harshest stuff. The stuff out on the edge is going to be the most mellow stuff, but you still want to capture some top end. So we're going to go, you know, maybe an inch in, like I said. And then we want to have the option of a brighter sound. So we're going to bring this other mic in and mic almost right on the center of the speaker. And both mics are about a half inch to a full inch off the netting of the amp. So there you go, guys. That's how I mic my amps. Thanks for watching.